that's what I think we have to spend our effort on, is maturing and developing ways to evaluate security solutions. So that, and that also includes, getting more people in the industry who are capable, who understand the fundamentals of the industry, who understand the technology, and who can evaluate those tools, who can say that,
Mhm.
hey, this thing works, this thing doesn't. Until we get that, what any purchasing decision is going to be a decision where you're comparing promises from two different vendors. And as long as that's the case, then you cannot truly, like, you cannot get to the point where, there is no FUD, because it's all how you feel, right? Oh, I feel more secure with this vendor because they've got, their colors are more calming. And that's really how it often is.
Welcome to Audience First, a podcast for tech marketers looking to break out of the echo chamber to better understand their audience and turn them into loyal customers. Every week, Danny Wolf has brutally honest conversations with busy tech buyers about what really motivates them, the things they hate that vendors do, and what you can do about it. Get access to practical information on how to build authentic relationships with your audience. Listen to and talk with your buyers, and apply real customer insights to your strategies and tactics. You owe it to the world to unmute your mic. Are you ready?
All right, welcome to another episode of Audience First. Today is a special day because I have a very special guest with me. I have the one and only Ross Haleliuk on. How's it going, Ross?
It is fantastic. Thank you so much, Danny. Super happy to be here. I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time, so it's awesome to finally make it and become one of the guests.
I love it. Yeah, you're an early listener, and I'm an early reader of your subscription blog slash newsletter. So we are both fans of each other, and I'm super happy that we finally got to schedule time and get on the podcast today. So thanks for coming on.
Likewise.
All right, so Ross, you know the drill. Let's go. Let's get into it. Who are you? What do you do? And why the hell do you do it?
So I'm an operator. I'm a builder. I'm somebody who enjoys building, whether we are talking about companies, product, relationships, communities. I thrive and I truly enjoy just getting things together, like and making them happen. Today, I wear multiple hats. So I'm a head of product at Lima Charlie, which is a cybersecurity startup. I'm an author at Venture and Security. I recently published a book, which we are going to be talking about later today. I co-lead an angel syndicate for security practitioners to invest in early stage startups. I do some advising with security startups. So multiple hats, if I may put it that way.
That's it. That's all you do. I mean, come on.
I, there
You
is
could do
there is a
more.
bit there is a bit more, but for the purpose of this conversation, let's center
Yeah.
on security related stuff. Yeah, you know what? Why do I do it? It is such a good question. You see, I like to be on the edge of innovation. I like to I love people in the industry, and all of it is just drives me to be as active as I can be.
Yeah, I love that, and it really spills over into a lot of what you're writing in venture and security. I want to dig into why you also created venture and security a little bit more deeply because I find it super valuable. I mean, to me, it seems valuable not just for the founders, but for the marketers, the salespeople, even the practitioners. So, what was your motivation for building that up?
Yeah, so Benjamin Franklin once said, write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. And for me, that's probably, I never thought of it as an official motto for what I do, but I would totally use it as one of the quotes that sort of underpin a lot of my work. And so, I guess to answer this question, I think I need to start before it all began, like way before venture and security became a thing. So, probably similar to you, I'm a generalist. Like I've worked across a number of different industries. I started in e-commerce, then I was in retail, wholesale, financial technology in both B2B and B2C space, and then ended up in cybersecurity. And the way I ended up in cybersecurity is kind of I don't know if it's unique, but it is different. Uh, I had a friend and a co-founder of Lima Charlie reach out to me and ask if I would be interested in joining to lead product. And when that happened, I was super excited. Like I was interested in cybersecurity prior to it. I've been reading some stuff about the industry. I was quite fascinated about the space and the opportunities it brings, and also the challenges that need to be solved. So I met the founders. I had a fantastic conversation about the space, and then I went home and I started reading about the industry. Like I just went super, super deep into trying to understand the space, trying to understand what are different trends shaping the industry. And ultimately, after a couple of hours, I called my friend. Well, I emailed my friend and I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. This is crazy. Like this is an insane industry. And he was like, oh my God, what do you mean? And for me, for somebody coming outside of security, whenever I was first faced with the reality of the industry, what I saw was MDR, NDR, XDR, same source, CSPM, DSPM, DLP, and you name it. So there was just so much, like so many abbreviations, so many terms that I needed to understand, and it just became confusing. I've moved from one industry to another before. Like that part hasn't been new. What was new is this additional complexity. And at the time, I was like, well, I don't know if I can do this. I genuinely don't. Like there is a lot for me to handle. Ultimately, I what I came to realize after some time is that I always enjoyed complexity, and it would be dumb of me to just say no to an opportunity simply because it sounds more complex than I initially anticipated. So I said yes, and that's how I joined Lima Charlie. When I ended up in the industry, what I also understood very quickly was that because I'm new, I need to get myself up to speed as quickly as possible. So I started talking to a lot of people. I started attending different events. I was reading books and articles and blogs and listening to podcasts. And I spent a lot of time looking at tools, like again, being in product, looking at different products, like what they offer, how they work. And very quickly, I found a way to break down the complexity into something that I could understand, something that I could make sense of. And like fast forward probably 6 months, like a year into into the industry, I ended up having tens and hundreds of different pages and Google Docs and pieces of paper lying on my desk with different thoughts and ideas and connections that I would have made between different concepts, different terms, different trends in the industry. And at a certain point, I was like, well, if it took me like so much effort, like days and nights and weekends, like to piece all of it together, there may be some other people in the industry who would benefit from it. And so that's how I wrote the first article. I did it on Medium, so like the intent has never been to start my own blog. I did it on Medium, and people responded incredibly well. So I looked at what happened, and I was like, well, that's nice. I guess I have more of it, so why don't I share more? And over time, I moved over to Substack. I started my own blog, and then I saw 500 people signed up. And I said, well, that's nice. I guess somebody is interested in cybersecurity. That's great. Although a lot of those were my friends and people who knew me, I started to write more. And then, another 1,000 people signed up. And then it was two and three and four and five and seven and 10. And at a certain point, I just ended up having a blog. So a recurring weekly or bi-weekly blog has never been the goal. But when I saw that people were actually reading and people were interested in it, I just decided, you know what? Like, let's double down on what works and let's just spend some time over the weekend putting the blog together. I do meet some people in the industry who somehow assume that this is what I'm focused on and this is my job, but it's my Saturday, Sunday project.
Well, I think they assume that because you put a great amount of detail and thought and structure into and evidence into each and every one of your posts. I mean, if you really drill down into your posts, I mean, these are not 500-word articles. This is
Sure.
upwards of 1,500 plus words. I mean, these are well thought out topics that are deep pains and challenges that we as go to market practitioners feel, or founders or security practitioners. But what I really appreciate about the blog is the fact that you're backing it up with a lot of data. You're sourcing to different pieces of knowledge that we could drill down to even more deeply. And, you break it down. You do a really good job breaking down the concepts. To your point, you wanted to create something that you would understand, right? And
Yeah,
so, it's really evident in how you write, and your thoughtful process is very prominent there, and I appreciate that as someone who's essentially an audience researcher. I really appreciate this. This is an absolute great resource for me, so well
thank you.
done
Yeah,
there.
I find that Paul Graham once said an amazing quote. He says that many people say that it's very hard to hire a good copywriter,
Mhm.
uh, because apparently there are not many good writers. And his response to that was, "No, no, no, you're missing the point. It is hard to find the clear thinker because many people are not clear thinkers, and good writing is just a reflection of that. It's just a reflection
Mm.
of clear thinking." And so for me, again, I don't consider myself, to be the absolutely best, writer out there. And frankly, that isn't the goal. What the goal often is to like take the complexity that people face and just explain it in simple words. Like if I'm somebody who is absolutely new to the industry, or if I'm a practitioner who has never been either interested or exposed to the go-to market in the industry, or if I'm a security, if I'm a go-to market practitioner, if I'm a marketer or a sales person, or a sales engineer, but I have never been exposed to the actual like doing security. Like, what do I need to know? And the answer often is that, well, wherever I need to know, I need to consume in such a way that I get it. And frankly, for me, one of the reasons why a lot of what I write ends up being so like granular and also somewhat simple to read is because I'm not a deeply technical security practitioner either. So when I talk about the problems that it took me hours and hours to understand, I try to make them as digestible for others as possible as well.
I love that. I mean, that's a goal of I think of a lot of people who are deep thinkers, who are curious, and who appreciate kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit in terms of of what needs to be digested, how it needs to be digested. I mean, pushing the boundaries in a way of not being complex, to your point, and pushing the boundaries of what is simple, being as simple as possible. And again, I really appreciate this resource. I'm going to be following it and digesting it for many years to come. Now, I want to shift the
And
conversation a little bit. Yeah, no, go for it.
no, like what I wanted to say is that you do something quite similar, so I'm sure you can relate. Like instead of
Yeah,
going super deep into like the marketing and the customer research buzzwords, like you're just talking about the problems the way they are. So
yeah, 100%. So I want to shift the conversation, and you mentioned something actually quite interesting. I'm going to noodle on that a little bit. You said that you're not very technical. You're not deeply technical. You're, and here's why I find this compelling, because despite the fact that you're not deeply technical, you've been able to master knowledge about an industry and a space that is seemingly technical. Not only that, you've been able to become quite respected and known on the practitioner side as well, despite the fact that you're not deeply technical. So I just find that it's interesting that you've been able to establish those relationships and build that trust and credibility amongst a technical audience as well. And I'll just drop that there and see if you have any comments regarding that.
sure, I definitely do. So first of all, let me adjust the statement I made. So
Okay.
when I say that I'm not deeply technical, what I truly mean is I have spent over a decade in the software space building technology with software engineering teams. When I say so, I do have a good understanding of technology and how it works. When I say I'm not deeply technical, what I mean is I'm not an incident responder. Like I'm not
Yes.
a
Mhm.
security engineer, so I'm not somebody who is like super deep in there. But frankly, I think like you are right to a high degree. I was able to build a good relationship and good network among practitioners. But frankly, I think the reason why and the reason why it has worked tremendously well for me is because one, I don't try to pretend that I know any more than I actually do.
Yeah.
So, I don't come into the room with like super smart face and just trying to make statements about words that I don't fundamentally understand. And like I try to call out the boundaries. If somebody approaches me and starts talking about what happens on the Linux kernel, there are very high chances that I'm not going to be either interested or I'm not going to be able to comprehend the complexity of wherever I'm being explained. But also, I find that like security practitioners, they're just regular people. They're similar to you and me. And like if you approach them as people first, if you treat them as people first, if you are just not being an asshole, which I know already sounds like a high bar for many people in the industry and in the world in general. But if you're just, if you come with an open mind and if you're willing to, especially if you're willing to ask questions and if you're willing to learn, you will always get that trust. I'm a big believer that you don't actually have to be like a deeply technical security practitioner to understand the industry. You absolutely don't. You need to be able to ask the right questions, and you need to have the people. You need to surround yourself with people who are capable of answering those questions in such a way that you can understand. And I find that the more senior, the more experienced the security person is, the more likely they're actually able to, you know, uh, dissect all of their knowledge and share it in such a manner that a sixth grader can get what they're talking.
Do you think that there's a stigma in this space with regards to the accessibility of security practitioners for founders, go-to-market teams, marketers, sellers, what's above, below, in between?
Well, I think so. A lot comes down to the incentives at play, in my view, and frankly, I like talking about incentives in general because they are what to a large degree shapes any industry, and cybersecurity is not an exception. So what I mean by that is, and in the ideal universe, uh, cybersecurity founders would be looking to solve impactful problems for people who experience those problems, right? And do it in such a way that makes it possible for the person who experiences a problem to evaluate the solution, to understand how exactly it can solve their problem, to try it, to see how it works, to see where the gaps may be, and so on and so forth. And if that's the relationship you have between founders and practitioners, I think it's a very healthy relationship. The challenge in cybersecurity, what I see quite often, is that many founders are not solving impactful problems. Many founders are building tools, and they're so in love with tools over the problems that whenever they do approach that poor practitioner, the conversation is very one-sided. It's not a dialogue where a founder is trying to understand the complexity of the organization's environment or the needs of the specific team. It is a founder who is there to sell their tool, and all they're talking about is their product. So I think there is a very fine line when it comes to just building relationships between founders and security practitioners. It is not easy, primarily because there is this perception uh, that if you are a founder or if you work on the vendor side, you're immediately just going to jump into the pitch, and you meeting a new person or connecting with somebody on LinkedIn is going to follow uh like a shit storm of messages, and like there is that assumption, like 100%. But I do think that the longer you are in the industry and the more you're able to show that you are not an insane salesperson who is just not interested about people, like who is not interested in people and who is just interested in pushing your tools, the easier it becomes. Like for you, for example, I bet if you approach a security practitioner at this point, and if they have a friend or a friend of a friend who knows you, or if they've seen your podcast and they've seen your take on the industry, they're probably not going to be scared, connecting and engaging with you. But that it takes a lot of intent. And when you're a founder, especially in cybersecurity, when you're a founder, when you're not solving an impactful problem that many people urgently need to solve and many people are willing to pay for solving, you get desperate very quickly about getting that attention, and you start looking for shortcuts, and you assume that sending 65 emails per day to security people on LinkedIn is a shortcut, and that's where things start to break down because many
Mhm,
people are desperate. Like
mhm.
they need to grow. Like they want to see the numbers go up and to the right, and they don't. And instead of challenging the underlying core assumptions upon which their business is built, they're starting to, to frantically trying to see, oh my God, what can I do? And just spam, spam, spam. That yeah. I know this is one of the problems we're
Oh,
going to be talking about, but that's really my take on it.
no, I love that. And in I wanna kinda go back to, your involvement in the security community. We've bumped into each other quite a few times in some of the more closed door security events, invite only. We kind of know the lowdown there, but I wanna get your take on any surprising insights that you've uncovered in your involvement in the security community. Like hanging out with the practitioners, what have you learned that has been a bit of a surprise that you didn't think that even you didn't never thought about before?
That is a good question. You see, I don't think I will be able to somehow, come up with an incredibly new list of learnings here. But uh to start, I think the part that was probably the most surprising to me is uh just seeing how much of the industry is focused on trying to listen to CISOs and have
Mm,
little attention is being paid to people who are doing the work. And the reason that part surprises me because with any product, with any solution, even if you're looking at the industry from the very, very pragmatic standpoint, you have you have economical buyers and you have the users, right? And so only focusing on and only paying attention to the needs of economical buyers is not going to it's not going to work tremendously well. Like the startup is inevitably going to like solve the problem for one of the two personas that are critical to the success of their solution. And for me, it's almost like it's mind-boggling how much attention there is directed on CISOs, like how many CISOs are just being chased by vendors and how they're surrounded by like tens and hundreds of different companies craving for their attention. Like while the people doing the work, again, by no means I'm not saying they're more accessible, but their opinion and their perspective is equally important. And yet you'd really see, unless so the one exception I would want to call out are companies started by security practitioners themselves. The company started by people who were still, who have probably been a security engineer or a security architect in their previous job, and now they're focusing on building something new. Those companies do tend to find a good balance between the buyers and the users, and the amount of effort they put into, connecting with them and understanding their needs. But aside from it, very few do. The second piece, which I don't I don't think it's surprising, but it's somewhat unfortunate, is the degree to which we have accustomed and we have become numb to the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the industry. Not the degree to which it is common, like not that, but the degree to which we now consider this to be a norm. You know, y- there are different behaviors seen in different industries. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But for the most part, people like the buyers and the participants within the industry are somehow trying to reject, like whether it's consciously or unconsciously, the practices in the industry that they don't like. In cybersecurity, however, we have almost embraced that this is the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be, and the best we can do is to just suck it up and live with it. To me, it is still somewhat surprising. Probably not as much as the first part, but it is surprising. And The last part, frankly, uh, it is surprising to me how much we as an industry are trying to reinvent the wheel and how little context do we have about what's happening outside of security and how it can affect what we do in the industry.
Hmm.
So, what I mean by that is most of the advancements in cybersecurity come from outside of cybersecurity. It's and again, this isn't anything that makes security unique. Like when you think about the technology itself, things like infrastructure as code greatly predate detections as code and security as code and policies as code and like all of that. Infrastructure as code is not a cybersecurity invention. When it comes to the go-to-market, like bottom-up adoption, the practitioner-focused marketing, uh, the idea of building communities and community-led growth, like all of that. None of it, like none of it was invented in cybersecurity. Like the tech space is much broader than security.
Yeah.
When it comes to product, for example, they need to focus on user experience and the fact that uh, companies in B2B are starting to expect the B2C experiences more and more often. That's not new to cybersecurity. That has been happening to many other industries as well. Like the time when uh, the users and the buyers would have had enough hours in their day to go through technical and support documentation and learn how to use a specific feature. That time is gone. Like products
Mhm.
have to be designed with user experience in mind. They have to be intuitive. They have to match the flow of security professionals. Like a lot of the stuff that you talk about. Like again, none of that is a cybersecurity invention. But we're still like knowing that all of those factors are true. We're still trying to treat security as this absolutely unique industry where we have to look at our problems and find a way to solve them. Which, I mean, I get why we are doing it, but at the same time, we have models outside of cybersecurity that show us have similar problems have been solved in different industries and where we can go with them. And
Mhm.
yet, like we keep sort of boiling in our own pot and we keep talking and ideating and trying to solve problems that sometimes it's just like turn your head to the left or to the right, like see what your friends in software engineering are doing, what your friends in fintech are doing, what your friends in martech and marketing technology are doing. There are answers there. Some answers there, at least an inspiration, if not direct answers.
I feel like I need another episode or 2 or 3 just to talk about this phenomenon because, like, I got sucked into this thinking early on in my tenure in this space that security is quite unique. I still believe the security
Sure.
space is quite unique, but this is an interesting point that you're mentioning, and it's getting me thinking about the way I do business as well, and who I target, and how I niche or break out. So this is quite an interesting point you're making. Why do you think we that this mindset though exists and people are failing or having trouble kind of turning their head to see what the solutions are outside of this space?
uh I'm sure there are plenty of reasons, and frankly, I don't think you can pinpoint one, like one and
Right.
only. If I were to take a guess, like an absolutely uneducated guess, I would say that one of the reasons why that is the case is because the vast majority of the people who work in cybersecurity have sort of they grew up in cybersecurity and they haven't had enough exposure to other fields.
Mm,
Again, whether it's good or bad, it's a second question. Like there is a lot of you know there are many good things that come out of that fact. But I think we are still like the long story short, we are just starting to get to the point where you can get a marketer from another industry come into security and allocate enough time to truly like to learn security and to become good at it, like to
mhm,
understand the needs of practitioners, to understand the needs of buyers. Historically, what you would get is either either people who have spent their whole career in one industry, and then you have this game of musical chairs where the same marketer was at this big company, they moved on to another big company, they moved on to another security startup, and then another security startup. And you look at the person's LinkedIn, or you look at the person's bio, and all they've ever done is cybersecurity marketing. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. The challenge is that all they've done is the same thing. They would go from
Mhm.
one company to another, then make sure that the company gets a booth at RSA, or gets a booth at Black Hat, get a booth at any other conference. Like they would design the same looking marketing materials. So they would just do the same thing. Because again, not because they were bad professional, because that is the only thing they've ever seen in their life, in their
Mhm.
professional life.
Mm.
Or as an alternative to that, you would get the marketer who comes, or I'm using the word marketer here really as an example, but you can substitute marketer for anything else, who comes from a different industry and takes zero time to understand cybersecurity. You would get somebody who was selling cars yesterday, today they're selling security, and tomorrow they might be selling, CRM, customer relationship management tools, and they just really don't care about getting that understanding. And only now, slowly, I'm starting to see people who are sort of in between, who have had some experiences from outside of cybersecurity, but who are committed enough to understand security when they come. And those are the people, in my view, who have the ability to bring a different perspective, because they've
Mhm.
seen how other industries work. They've seen some innovative ideas that work in other markets, but they can also adapt them. They don't just apply them as templates, but they can adapt them to the industry. So I think, and frankly, the same applies to software engineering, where you've only been a software engineer in cybersecurity. Your view of software engineering can be very different than if you've worked at different places and then you ended up in cybersecurity. Like if you and even like similar, if you're a security practitioner who have only worked in one vertical, like if you've only worked in a bank or at different banks throughout your career, the way you will see security will be very different than if you worked in a
Mhm.
a tech startup, in a product company, and then you worked at the government institution. So
Mhm.
we need this diversity of experiences, and now I think we're starting to get to it, which again, it's just a natural evolution of the industry, so we can only get better from here.
How do you suggest those people who have that diversity of experience and who are curious and who want to more deeply learn about the space and about the practitioners, um, how do you suggest they bridge kind of the gap that's occurring in this industry between vendor and buyer?
The gap. Tell me more. How do you see this
Well,
gap?
wow, we don't have enough time to talk about how I see the gap, but uh, again, you have a large lack of access to buyers because of poor behavior across the sales and marketing side or the vendor side. But also, I think poor behavior on the practitioner side. So there's that stigma of like, oh, just don't talk to me because you're bucketed into this, um, you know, uh, segment that's going to bug me and pitch me right off the bat versus wanting to establish some kind of authentic relationship because you're a marketer, right? Or you're associated with this company and I've heard bad things about them, but you may not be that bad of a salesperson, right? Or
Mhm,
marketer. There are so many different reasons, right? That stem from bad practices on both sides. How do we kind of alleviate that or close that gap just a little bit more?
yeah, that is a good question. You see, I think I have a very different perspective, or at least somewhat different
Well,
perspective on
tell
this
tell me
topic.
about it.
So you see, I think a part of the challenge that we have to discuss is the fact that there there are not enough companies that have uh there are not as many companies that have the people you're referring to as security buyers. Think about it from this perspective. 9 out of $10 in the enterprise sales in are spent through channel.
I read that on one of your articles. I love that, and
So and
I
again,
wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
so again, let's assume that let's assume that a lot of the stats we see in the industry, they're going to be somewhat wacky. Like let's just say it's 7 out of 10. Like let's be
Mhm.
generous. Let's just say 7 out of 10. So you know as well as I do that the top, Fortune 500 enterprises or Fortune 1000 enterprises, they typically have exclusive agreements, exclusive purchasing agreements with certain resellers that they work with, right?
Mhm.
And yet they're also the ones who have the largest security budgets. So the ones who every single startup is trying to target. But they also have, like, they typically have access to, to consulting firms, to the, big four or however other consulting firms you prefer. They have access to resellers. They have access to to decent security talent. Then, so if they don't, if a large percentage of them don't buy direct, then who does? Well, let me ask you this. How many CISOs do you think there are that have a decent enough security budget in their company for to be interesting or attractive for a cybersecurity startup? The reality is it's actually not as many. The vast majority of the SMB market, like it is really non-existent because SMBs, they for non-existent for the vast majority of security startups, because SMBs, they either need an all-in-one SMB focused solution, which the majority of the uh, enterprise first tools aren't, or they access their security expertise through consultants, they access it through VCs, they access it through security practitioners and others, like their IT, uh, IT service providers, and so on and so forth. So I'm going back to my question: how many qualified buyers of cybersecurity tools are there? It's not as many. We're probably talking about, I don't know, in the US, let's just say 5 to 10,000. So when you have as many potential buyers as you have vendors, it's kind of hard for the buyers to not get overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
fundamentally, even though we talk about security market in terms of numbers and we say how many, like, billions or trillions or wherever people, like wherever numbers of people are using these days to describe the security market, there are, the reality is that there is a really fairly small number of companies that can purchase security tools. And now imagine that each of those companies is getting bombarded by security vendors. So obviously it's hard. But I think that is not the biggest issue. Like I sort of I acknowledge that. I do think it's I don't know if it's a problem, but it's a factor. It is how the market really looks like. I think what truly is a problem is the fact that we as an industry do not currently have, well, cybersecurity is a market characterized by a very high asymmetry of information. So no buyers can accurately assess the security tools on the market. They don't know what value they offer. They don't know if they actually work. They don't know like what they bring to the table. And sellers can make whichever claims they want to without really ever having to like offer a proof, because again there is no easy way to evaluate those tools. And I think that's really the core issue with cybersecurity. It's not that there are too many tools, like, not really. It's not that there are too many startups, not really. In fact, I have an article coming up in the coming weeks talking about the fact that we don't have enough startups and we need more VC funding in the industry. But I have my own contrarian takes on the space. uh, I think the issue is that we do not have, as an industry, an easy way for buyers to evaluate security tools, because uh, it's just how it works, right? We Security teams are not mature enough; they don't have the right capabilities. But also, security is just very hard to evaluate. Like if you're buying, let's just say you're looking at vendor A versus vendor B, how do you know if each of those two tools is going to offer a better level of protection? How do you know which of those two tools is going to offer a better level of protection 2 weeks from now, when the threat landscape would have changed? You don't. And because there is no easy way to evaluate it, we're going for we're just looking at the vendor market and we are saying, like, yeah, this, there seems to be some trend. I'm just going to go this because, the salesperson was nicer to me and like their brand looks more solid and their booth at the RSA was bigger. And that, like, that's really the challenge. If we did have see if there was a better way to evaluate security tools, then a lot of fad and a lot of bullshit we have in the industry, it would just naturally get self-selected out, but it doesn't, because the difference between an XDR from a vendor that has a team of 600 researchers and detections engineer, and the difference between that tool and a tool that's built by two people in a garage is very hard to evaluate. And by no means am I saying that either of those two is better or more people means a better technology, but what I'm saying is just how do you prove it? And so that's what I really think. That's what I think we have to spend our effort on, is maturing and developing ways to evaluate security solutions. So that and that also includes, getting more people in the industry who are capable, who understand the fundamentals of the industry, who understand the technology, and who can evaluate those tools, who can say that,
Mhm.
hey, this thing works, this thing doesn't. Until we get that, what any purchasing decision is going to be a decision where you're comparing promises from two different vendors. And as long as that's the case, then you cannot truly, like, you cannot get to the point where, there is no FUD, because it's all how you feel, right? Oh, I feel more secure with this vendor because they've got, their colors are more calming. And and that's really how it often is.
You're dropping some truth bombs here. I don't know if people are gonna be able to handle it. Oh, I love it though. This is good. Oh man, we're cutting it short here with time, but I want to get into that deeper. Again, we might have to do a part 2 here,
Sure.
Ross. I want to make some time to talk about
I mean, to be
the
fair, just
yeah,
like let me add a few more thoughts to it. I think that we are getting better. I think we
yeah.
are maturing, and I think that buyers need to continue doing what they've started doing. They need to go to their peer networks for
Mm.
feedback about vendors. They need to take it to social media when vendors and companies don't live up to their promises. Like, if there is no easy way for us to evaluate tools, then at the very least we can emphasize those peer sharing feedback mechanisms where people can share with others, like, the experiences they've had, the challenges they've run into, so that they can make more informed decisions. Uh, at the same time, I'm going to assume that eventually we'll get lawsuits where a vendor who has been promising a 100% security and to stop 100% of all the breaches and APTs will be challenged in court for not doing so. I think eventually it will happen. And when it does happen, it may start to change a bit in how we market and how we position our security tools. Because the
Mhm.
challenge right now is that you go on any vendor's website, and if you just read through their marketing materials, any single vendor is going to stop 100%, breaches, prevent 100% of advanced persistent threats, deal with 0 days, and just offer 100% confidence that you're going to be safe and secure. Obviously, that is not the reality we live in. And eventually that marketing is going to mature. The same way, there was a time when in healthcare, a vendor could claim literally anything. You drink this pill, you're going to live for 600 years. Now there are some regulations and some constraints and some liability exposures whenever that happens. So a lot of it, see, I don't see it as like, oh my God, we need to save the industry. I see it as every industry goes through its natural, evolution. It's unfortunate to sometimes see just how many more years it will take for us to get where many other industries are. But at the same time, it makes me hopeful that by the time, I'm going to be retiring, or be in my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, however long people are going to live, the industry will look much better. So that's optimistic.
And this is good timing because I just got an email from you about your new book.
Oh, you did.
I literally just got an email now
Nice.
available on Amazon, Cyber for Builders.
That is
Tell me
correct.
more.
Yes.
What is Cyber for Builders? What is this book? Tell me about that. Why did you write it?
Yeah. So, like, over the past several years, I've accumulated a lot of knowledge about the industry, about the way companies are built, like what works, what doesn't. And I see that knowledge as a foundation for anyone building companies in the space. At the same time, I've advised a number of companies. I evaluated even more companies during the due diligence as an angel investor. And what I've seen is that people tend to repeat the same mistakes and people tend to do the same things over and over and over again. So, Cyber for Builders is a fairly short, well, it ended up being longer than I wanted to. It's about like 240 or so pages book about building a cybersecurity company. Uh,
Mhm,
the, there are six chapters, like six parts. It starts by looking at the industry, by discussing different players in the industry and how they contribute to the overall ecosystem. It looks at different types of investors and what founders need to know. It looks at different types of founders and marketers and VCs and builders, like literally anybody who is looking to build or help build a cybersecurity company. So it's looking at different players in the industry, uh, how they all come together, like what incentives drive their behaviors, have to work with each of those, have to leverage what they have to offer. It then goes on to talk about some of the vendors uh, seen in the industry. Sorry, some of the vendors, some of the trends seen in the
mhm,
industry, and have those trends contribute to the overall, to the how those trends shape the future of the cybersecurity space. And then from there, it talks about building the company and what it looks like to go through the ideation in cybersecurity, what it looks to go through, building a product, how to assemble the team, what are some of the, potential founder profiles, and like have to evaluate if you're going to be able to work with this person. And if this person is a good fit for specifically building a cybersecurity company. And then it goes on and on, to talk about fundraising and go to market and different go to
mhm.
market strategies, and have to think about go to market from the first principles as opposed to just, oh, how do we get CISO into a demo? So a lot of those, a lot of those somewhat obvious for people who have been in the industry and who have built a lot of like many companies in the industry, but also useful, materials for people who are either practitioners looking to start their own companies, or maybe marketers looking to thinking about the go to market strategy and have to take their startup to the next level. Investors looking to find a way to evaluate what cybersecurity companies are actually promising and solving the right problems. So again, the angle is cyber for builders.
Mm,
That,
I love
that's
it, I love it, I love it, and I'm excited to drill down into that. I mean, here we go. We have contributions by 50 plus cybersecurity entrepreneurs, operators, thought leaders, and investors. I love this.
And
This is
thank you.
absolutely
Well,
phenomenal.
Danny, you forgot to mention that your contribution is one of those.
Well, I'm
So
trying to stay humble here. I'm trying to stay humble.
yeah, no, it is exciting. Yes, over 50 people have contributed in some form to the book. The forewords are written by Caleb Saima and Jeremiah Groisman, like two people who are really known very, very well in the industry as fantastic entrepreneurs and champions of the innovation in security. So I'm excited to help people, and I'm also excited to get as much feedback as possible about the book.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on that. I'm gonna order the hard copy. I wanna know what's your favorite chapter and why?
Ah, I frankly don't know what my favorite chapter is. I would like to just spit something smart, but I think the part about different trends in the industry is probably the most interesting, but that's just because a large part of those trends are something that I see is happening already, but also not a small part are trends that I'm seeing the beginnings for, but I'm hoping that are going to accelerate and really increase change the way the industry functions in some forms.
I love it. I love it. Well, this is has been super insightful for me, and like I said, we likely have to do a part two because there are a lot of things we touched on and didn't have enough time to to drill down into. But before we sign off today, Ross, is there anything you want to impart on the audience today?
No, I mean, if you're interested in building cybersecurity companies or what it takes to build one, uh, or what it takes to succeed with one, or what it takes to evaluate a good investment, get Cyber for Builders. Get your copy on Amazon. Check out the blog. I try to be consistent and do it weekly. Sometimes I do it bi-weekly, but in general, I obviously, it probably doesn't sound too humble, but I do think it's a great source about the business of cybersecurity. And definitely come back to Audience First and check out what Danny is offering and all the wealth of information and knowledge she distills through her insights and by talking to tons of CISOs and security practitioners.
Well, Ross, thank you. Thank you for the shout out as well. I appreciate it. And thank you for listening and being uh you're an advocate at this point. I mean, I think since day one you've been following and consuming the information. So I appreciate that. And thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, this has been another episode of Audience First. We are out.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Audience First. If you like what you've heard, feel free to follow or subscribe to Audience First on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast streamers.